As anyone knows who has dealt with a loved one facing a life-threatening illness, it's exhausting. It's exhausting for the person who's sick, and it's exhausting for the caregivers. Well, our guest today is Woody Weingarten, longtime journalist and the author of a new book, Rollercoaster, chronicling more than his wife's battle with breast cancer, what he dealt with as a caregiver. Welcome, Woody. How are you?
I'm terrific, and thank you for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Now, we've known each other for about 30 years. You were the editor of the Jewish Bulletin for
23 years.
And have been a journalist for 59 years.
Right.
Talk to us about this book, obviously personal. What was it that led you to write this book, which of course means, when did you find out about your wife's cancer?
20 years ago, she was diagnosed, and 20 years ago, I started writing a journal for therapy for me. And suddenly, about a year after that, I decided, hey, this probably is something that would help other people if I could expand it and do some research. And that's basically what the book is. It goes way beyond our story. It has data on meds and on research, and it's the only up-to-date book written by a man for mainly men, but men means fathers and sons and brothers and partners.
Right. Have you had men come up to you and say, oh my God, this is my story, but I could never be honest enough to talk about what I felt as the caregiver watching my loved one go through this?
They haven't said quite those words, but they've given me that sensation. And I run a support group, and I've been doing that for 20 years too, for men. And the men in there relate to the book and everything in it. And in fact, there's a chapter extracted from our website, which quotes a lot of the men.
Now, you and Nancy have been married for how long?
29 years.
29 years.
Yeah.
So 6 years into your marriage, you found out about Nancy's diagnosis.
Correct.
Do you remember that day?
I will never forget that day. It was terrifying for me. I was afraid she was going to die.
Of course.
And in those days, cancer was just a horrible thing to happen. It is better now. It is still bad, but it is better. And the reaction I had was the same she had, but she couldn't talk about that. She could not talk about her fears because she wanted to be stoic about it. And later on, she admitted that she was afraid.
Well, I mean, if you'll pardon the analogy, it's like a double closet. It's like you're afraid to show that you're scared, and she's afraid to show that she's scared. So the two of you probably do a lot of time not talking about being scared.
Right. And in fact, the breast cancer brought on something in our marriage that we had never experienced before. There were times when we would not share what we were feeling with the other person.
Right. You know, it has been talked about and written and discussed on this show, the correlation between what went on during the early years of the AIDS, HIV epidemic, when a lot of people, mainly gay men, were talking about the disease because no one else was talking about it. I have heard that the breast cancer community has learned some tactics from the AIDS HIV community. Have you had people share that with you? I mean, for instance, there's a group in San Francisco called the AIDS Emergency Fund, which now is merged with the Breast Cancer Emergency Fund, and they're using best practices.
There is a similarity, there is an overlap, and the emotional impact is the same. The emotional impact of anything where it's life-threatening or just at great risk, that you go up and down. That's what the roller coaster is all about. Happily, there is light at the end of the tunnel for both AIDS patients and for breast cancer patients. But both were treated as lepers at a certain point, and in the recent years, it has changed to positive.
So 23 years ago, there was a stigma for breast cancer. Do you think that that has now been totally alleviated, or it's still there?
No, it is still there. In fact, just a couple of years ago, there was a piece written and picked up by the AP, the Associated Press, that said that supervisors were very down on people who had breast cancer as well as AIDS and other things like that. They thought that the chemotherapy, for example, made them very tired. And the fact is about half of them were tired and the other half were not. But they thought all of them were. They thought that they would never recover, and they were afraid as well. So there was a stigma. Lesbians who had breast cancer, there was a double stigma.
Did you ever think you would become a breast cancer activist?
Absolutely not. That was
You kind of backed into an expert niche.
that was organic. I consider myself an expert at this point in time because I did so much research and have been running this group for 20 years, so I have hands-on experience as well.
Right. Talk to me a little bit about some of the FAQs of breast cancer, the things that automatically come to mind, and also some questions and answers that people who are not dealing with this or haven't dealt with it, either as someone who's dealing with it as a medical condition or one of their loved ones, you know.
One of the big things is the loss of hair. Women are particularly upset about losing their hair. Another is losing breasts when there's a mastectomy. I have a friend, my wife and I have a friend who came to our house, happens to be a lesbian, and she asked if I would mind if she flashed me. And I said, "What?" And she said, "Can I flash you?" And I said, "Okay." And she lifted up her blouse, and there was a scar from the mastectomy, but she had had a tattoo done on it of a rose and a vine, and it was the most beautiful tat I've ever seen.
Besides the stigma of losing a breast or losing your hair as a woman, what does it do? And of course, I'm asking you to put yourself in your wife's mind, which after 29 years, you can probably do somewhat. What do you think the woman who's dealing with breast cancer goes through when she looks at her husband and says, "I've got breast cancer, I'm worried about how I might look in your eyes"?
I think the fear goes away after a while, unless the person is terminal, but it disappears as the husband's support is there. And that becomes critical, how that support is registered. Men think they can fix anything. And they can't, but they think so, and they have to learn to be able to do that. One of the things I talk about a lot is that wives frequently just want you to hold their hand, and you have to do that. They don't want you to be an expert. They don't want you to be there and telling them what to do.
Right. So have you become a more patient man because of your wife's breast cancer?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Patient, understanding, compassionate.
Right. We only have about a minute left. Talk to me about, besides that patient, what I've heard it called the cruel gift of cancer has given you for 23 years.
The gift as a gift is not a gift, but what it does do is it makes you appreciate every single day, and we talk about that all the time. And we do live as much as we can in today, here and now, because we don't know what's coming tomorrow.
Right.
Cancer is chronic. It can always come back. Nancy is 20 years out, so we have been very lucky about that and very happy with that. But we worry about it every time she goes back for a mammogram, and that will continue.
All right. Well, thank you for being with us. The book is called Rollercoaster, How a Man Can Survive His Partner's Breast Cancer. My guest is Woody Weingarten. His wife, Nancy, is in the green room. We're glad they're both here. I'm David Perry. Thanks for watching 10%.